Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Sterling Live. My name is Caitlin Brower. I am Sterling's social media manager. Just a reminder that we do go live every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern across Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. So I'm super excited to be here today with Vincenza Caruso-Valente, our General Manager of Retail, Staffing, and Franchise. And today we're going to be talking about hiring in today's employers market. So Vincenza, thank you so much for joining me. Can you go ahead and, introduce yourself, say a couple of things about you, your role here at Sterling?
Sure. Thanks, Caitlin. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me. Really quickly, to your point, I'll introduce myself to the greater audience. I'm Vincenza Caruso-Valente, and I'm the General Manager of our Retail Staffing and Franchise vertical, which I'm proud to say is our largest vertical at Sterling. I'm also proud to report that I'm coming up on my 10-year anniversary at Sterling as well.
I'm coming up on my 1 year, so you're a little bit further ahead of me. But
there you go. You got the zero on the end. But I've had the opportunity over the past 10 years to be just part of such an amazing organization that has grown tremendously and really has enabled to evolve the background and identity services industry. So from my point of view, it's been a wonderful ride, and we're looking for additional goodness as we move forward. So, but overall in this role, just to give you a high level, as the general manager, I'm accountable for the end-to-end life cycle of the entire business line. So from the point of prospect to the prospect becoming a client, to client evolution, helping clients evolve as their programs change, as I'm sure we've seen much of through COVID, which we'll talk about in a bit. But it also includes the vertical focus specific to sales, marketing, client support, customer service, product, and operations. So true business being managed end to end. We have the privilege of partnering with some of the largest staffing firms domestically and globally. Our staffing vertical also includes subsectors such as RPOs, BPOs, and call center organizations. On the retail side, we service in all of the subsectors that we know exist in retail, including traditional brick and mortar, e-commerce, convenience store, grocers, discount stores, big box. On the franchise side, we partner with some of the largest franchise names out there that both domestically and globally. So bottom line, we are serving some of the most essential organizations in the most relied upon industries on a day-to-day basis, and even more so now during COVID-19.
Yeah, so I love that you touched on the vertical a little bit, because that is crucial and very helpful for our audience week over week to dive into all of Sterling's verticals. So anything else you want to add about retail staffing and franchise, the background and scope of the business, or any current industry trends, insights that you're seeing?
So there are many, and I know we're going to touch on them in a little bit. So I'll hold off on going into any of the tangible details. However, just touching on a moment on the fact that these two industries are so heavily relied upon, especially over the last 7 months with COVID-19 impacting all of us, and honestly, how essential they have been in helping keep our nation running and allowing us as individuals, as parents, as consumers, stay fed and stay healthy and give us the basics of everyday living. So
yeah, definitely important. And like you said, over the past couple of months, crucial for many of us. So, big thank you there. And let's go ahead and get into, our topic. So of hiring in today's employers market. So I want our audience to understand a little bit more, both an employer driven market and a candidate driven market. So high level view of what the two of them are, and then mainly what is the difference between the two of them?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And as I'm sure you can appreciate, it's been a really interesting year from a hiring standpoint. And, at the moment, contingent on the industry and even subsector of certain industries, specifically in retail that you're in, you could easily be in an employer-driven market. And I know we're focusing today a lot about the employer-driven market that we're in due to the due to the unemployment rate, due to the amount of individuals that are looking for work, which enables employers to have a bit of a, let's call it an edge. But it does vary. And I know we're going to talk about that a little bit further. But to your point, just to set the stage of the difference between the two, what I'll say is an employer-driven market is where there are more qualified candidates than job openings that are available. And as the economy shrinks and as unemployment rises, as we've seen happen over the past several months, the demand for jobs increase, resulting in scarcity. So basically, employers are at an advantage when negotiating pay and benefits with candidates in this type of environment. That's the simple explanation or definition of it. And in a candidate-driven market, that's a market where there are more jobs than qualified candidates available to fill the job openings, resulting in the same. So an unemployment decrease and an economy growth, it increases that demand for the qualified job candidates, and it increases the result of the low supply and the demand. So basically, job seekers are at an advantage when negotiating pay and benefits in this type of environment.
Yeah, so that's definitely a great overview, and happy to, understand the differences a little bit more. I'm going to take a moment here real quick just to let our audience know, if you do have any questions for Vincenza, please feel free to place them in the comment section across Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, wherever you're watching right now. And I'll make sure I get these questions in front of her. So now that we understand the difference between the two, would you say that we're currently in an employer's market? And then does this vary by industry, job role, et cetera?
It's a great question. So 2020 has truly been a unique year.
Right.
As many of us know, at the start of 2020, our country saw the lowest unemployment rate, I think, since the late 50s at approximately 3.5%. So fast forward to the end of April 2020, unemployment skyrocketed to nearly 15% due to COVID-19 and the national shutdown that occurred.
Right.
So as of August, the unemployment rate fell to 8.4%, which is a great sign, and it's indicating that the nation's labor market is continuing its slow but steady recovery. So while the labor market is encouraging, many are proceeding with caution for the months ahead as the country continues to navigate, the national reopening events that are happening, schools, limitations are getting lifted and restrictions are getting lifted by state, even by city. And it's impacting how retailers are able to reopen, how restaurants are able to reopen. So the coronavirus outbreak has left thousands of people, unfortunately, lining up for unemployment. And we've seen those massive layoffs across such industries. A few I've already mentioned, but hospitality, aviation, restaurants, manufacturing, traditional retail, some franchises on the retail side as well, all have felt that grave impact from COVID-19. Traditional retailers have had to battle store closings, meeting immediate social distancing requirements, supply chain disruption, and just that increased demand for e-commerce that's now become the standard. So at the same time, it's also changed the hiring landscape for specific segments of the retail industry and those who serve it. Essential businesses such as pharmacies, e-commerce retailers that are providing essentials to individuals daily, grocers, convenience stores, quick serve restaurants who are feeding our necessary workers and feeding our families when we don't have the convenience of getting up and just going out and buying food like we had. Delivery and shipping services all have had a significant impact to their business lines. All have been tirelessly working. I mean, just literally around the clock to bolster the staffing needs in order to meet the recent surge of demand that they've seen over the last several months. So additionally, the role of the traditional in-store retail worker has also changed. So yes, there is an increased population of candidates and individuals who are unemployed looking for work. The expectations of these roles are so much different now, and they're so much higher, and they come with a different level of I'll call it responsibility and risk at the same time. The expectations are really high. They have to now clean counters, they have to clean door handles, they have to clean shopping carts. So it's not just a meet and greet, hi, how are you, ring you up and walk away. That is no longer the world that we're living in. So these hires are dedicated are specifically to hand, there's also the hiring that's also happening in the stores for individuals that are handling now the dynamic of that surge in e-commerce that's been happening, the buy online, pick up in store. There are all of these individuals now that are handling this type of engagement, curbside delivery, serving as a personal shopper. And then having the individual either have it delivered to their home or they pick it up. On the staffing side, we've seen a broad spectrum of impact as well. So significant drop in hiring demand in light industrial and manufacturing when we were during the full shutdown between March and June, but we also saw a substantial increase during that time for remote call center hiring, security organizations, healthcare hiring. So to your question, in aggregate, I would say the U.S. does have more qualified candidates than job openings, which would make it an employer's market, but it really depends on the industry. But like I just shared, the employer market doesn't apply for all industries and all roles. Essential businesses are hiring more than ever to keep up with demand COVID's creating. What is critical too in this employer's market is that, not to make it feel like they've got all what I'll call the power in hand. It's critical for these employers, if they want to hire strong candidates, talented individuals, build a strong culture of these people that you're bringing in during these really unique times, is making sure that they have a strong, clear communication around how they are keeping both their employees and their consumers safe. Providing that safe work and shopping environment is really, really critical. Because otherwise, when you think about it, if you don't have those expectations set up front and you don't have a strong business model that promotes that safety and trust between both of those populations, it's going to limit your ability to actually recruit people, have them want to come to work for you, have them remain with you. That employee loyalty and worker satisfaction, and just that peace of mind, that knowing that they're grateful to be hired and getting a job, but they want to make sure that they are also being kept safe, that their employer cares about them, and that they also care about what happens when they leave their job and they go home to their families. So that's a really critical element from my point of view, that in these instances where an employer market does exist, it's not just they have the upper hand on being able to hire from a large pool of people. They really need to make sure that they are taking care of those individuals and have strong strategies and plans on enabling their success.
So I thought that was a great answer to what many watching might have thought was a simple question. Just asking, what kind of market are we in right now? What does it look like from an employee standpoint, from an employer standpoint? So you provided a lot of great examples of different types of industries, organizations, prime examples of what's going on right now, like as we face the coronavirus and everything like that. So I really thought that was great. Early on in your answer, though, and I kind of want to take a little bit of a, different route right here. You mentioned traditional retail and then in comparison to franchise retail. So I want our audience to understand that a little bit more, because I know, working for Sterling now, really trying to understand you see the word retail and you think of like a clothing store and you think, it's not doing well right now and things like that. But there's so much more behind it. There's so much there. So could you just provide a brief, difference between the two, description and things like that?
Yeah, sure. So, when I talk about traditional retail, think of your mall stores, all of your clothing stores, your toy stores, your, what I'll call larger department stores. Those are traditional retail. They have a profound and established brick and mortar location presence nationally, heavy hiring on the sales associates, sales managers, cashiers type environment. But that, that does break into the additional subsectors that I talked about earlier as well. Convenience stores, grocery stores, pharmacies, stores of that nature. But that's, what we call a traditional retailer. It's they have a strong presence, brick and mortar wise, and also have multi-channel dynamic as well. Multi-channel meaning they don't just have brick and mortar locations, but they also have online shopping. So, I'll use any clothing store as an example that you can think of. Let's use the Gap, right? They have huge brick and mortar location presence, but they also have online shopping as well. So that's traditional retail. On the franchise side, predominantly what we see in franchise, it's more related to what they call in the industry the QSRs. QSR meaning quick serve restaurants. Quick serve restaurants is everyone from your Dunkin' to your 7-Eleven, and then to some of the parts of the industry that are less, let's call it food based, but are also home store based. So the Ace Hardwares of the world. These are franchise organizations, retail in nature, brick and mortar based location where a consumer physically has to come into the store and purchase.
Yeah, thank you for that.
As I'm sure you can appreciate, the one element that's different with franchise is that there's an element of individual ownership. So franchise allows for an individual to come in and say, I'd like to buy the Dunkin' franchise, and I'm going to become owner of this brand and a location.
Yeah.
So it's that independent element of ownership, where in traditional retail, it's corporate owned stores, corporate owned strategies, et cetera.
Thank you for that. I'm sure that was very helpful for our followers and those who are watching right now. So we did get a good question from LinkedIn, but it's actually something we will be touching on a little bit later. So I do want to let you know that we will be answering your question. Don't worry, it's in regards to clients and best practices. So we will get there. Before we move there, so we've established that, while it's dependent on industry right now, that we are definitely in an employer-driven market right now. So what are you seeing as the top challenge for employers looking to hire during an employer-driven market, and what's the solution?
So it's a great question. I think I touched upon it briefly earlier, but return to work considerations are a continued challenge that we see many employers battling at this time, trying to navigate through best that they can, with just the situation being so fluid on a daily basis. So number one concern for all organizations is without a doubt the safety of its employees and its consumers in the everyday work environment. So it's important to create that culture of, not just like I said to you earlier, being very strong in your communication around everything from your hygiene practices at home and in the workplace, and balancing that. It's, here's what we're doing for you at work, but here's what we also need for you to do for us when you're not at work and you're at home, to keep not just yourself safe, but when you're coming into work, keeping our brand, keeping our brand strong, and also keeping our consumers safe as well. So, from that point of view, it's, that preparation around that and the ability to be agile and pivot is really key.
Yeah.
In addition to being prepared to bring employees back to work, organizations across the board are also dealing with transitioning, especially for those where, whether it's an employee or an employer or an employee market, it's how do you actually recruit individuals, especially when you have such a large need in a really short time frame, like some organizations have experienced. So, from that point of view, recruiters are exploring a variety of new tools and online communications to do everything from sourcing to interviewing and onboarding new employees and bringing employees back to the workplace, where you could easily do that in training sessions that may have taken place day one in store or on location or a distribution center, whatever the case may be. They're now doing a lot of these activities virtually. So We've become very dependent on our two-dimensional lives, like we're doing right now today.
Right. Yeah, prime example right here.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think I stated it earlier too, or we're going to touch upon it in a little bit, but technology is playing a huge part in the new virtual recruiting model. Being prepared to do that, whether you're a retailer, a staffing firm, having that technology in place that allows for that stream of candidates to come in, be able to make your fills like you need them, and at the core of it all, hiring really strong individuals it's so now it's that much more important than it's ever been to have that technology in place.
Yeah, so let's keep talking about tech and other items as we look towards the future. So the remainder of 2020, looking into 2021, when peak hiring season for retailers. What is that going to look like? So you brought up tech, so that's clearly a huge component moving forward when it's peak hiring season. But what else? What else does that look like?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I know that in many industries, the last 4 to 5 months of the year are their what we'll call their peak season. And in staffing and retail, it's the prime time for hiring. It's where the majority of hiring happens. It coincides with what we'll call in normal times back to school, holiday shopping. All of the holidays kind of cram themselves together, right? We have our Halloween, Thanksgiving, all of those, holidays at the end of the year in December that just cause that surge of need in candidates. So, this is such a great question because, the one thing I had mentioned earlier, and it's really, a driver due to the COVID-19 pandemic, is that what we've seen specifically in retail, which has a direct correlation to also what happens in the staffing space, is digital acceleration. And what I mean by that is what we talked a bit about earlier. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic, it's been key on how organizations are trying to navigate what this new peak season look like. What I'll say is pre-pandemic, the NRF actually conducted a survey at the end of last year when economy was incredibly strong, unemployment was low, as I had mentioned. They did a study that found that approximately 12% of consumers were predominantly shopping online, 12% out of the national population. During the pandemic, this number actually doubled to near 25%. And candidly, based on what we're seeing and going into the back end of this year, last few months of this year, that increase in percentage is the expectation is that that's going to continue.
Yeah.
And it's also going to continue again because of the uncertain dynamic that comes along with the pandemic and how buying behavior may also change, because we're going to be heading into fall and winter in, specifically for us, for example, we're in the Northeast, so we have 4 seasons. We won't be out as much. We won't be out and about because the warm weather is going to slowly go away, unfortunately, and we're going to become homebodies. So our desire to go out, knowing that there's a continued pandemic that's looming, is going to definitely drive consumer behavior. Alternatively, I will say, based on the study that was done and just some of the behavior that's been observed with a lot of, like we talked about, shelters in place being removed and parts of the country going quote unquote back to normal. As retailers have been reopening stores nationwide, they're actually seeing, as stores have been opening, they have been measuring the conversion of in-store shopping. And what that means is that when people are going out, even though the store may only have 25% capacity to be in the store, but when they are there, they are actually spending more versus browsing, what you would normally expect people to do in normal times, or what they've seen. So that's a good and a positive trend for retailers to see. And it's, if anything, it just shows them that this consumer behavior really drives the types of hires that they're going to need. Yeah. So, again, knowing that this digital acceleration's had such a profound impact on all of us, But in the retail and staffing spaces specifically, they've got to quickly plan for how do they meet the need for the increased demand in distribution center and fulfillment hiring. How do they increase their hiring for supply chain managers, because supply chain is such a huge part of the retail space. And
right.
these are individuals that have become more in demand, again, where there may be an employee market versus an employer market, because these are what we'll call new entries into the employment space that have become more needed and more prevalent. So, the increased demand for hourly workers in manufacturing organizations and retailers. They need those essential folks that are picking up the product, they're packing the product, they're giving it to the drivers and the shipping and delivery companies. Also, mass amount of demand coming out of those types of positions and resources as well. So, just a really interesting, watching the industry and just watching both GDP, consumer behavior, spend, all of that. A recent article shared a few days ago, and it highlighted a lot of all of this dynamic that's happening in the overall retail space, and they're seeing that that organizations are in overdrive right now, looking to meet that high demand for the rest of the year, because they're going into peak season. But technically, for a lot of these organizations, especially the essential ones that we talked about, they've been in peak season since March. They've literally been. It's been Christmas in March, April, May, June, July. They really are trying to meet the high demand of people that they need, both, again, because of just the sheer essential element of their organization and what they bring, and the fact that they have to have a constant flow of individuals coming in so that they can meet that demand that they're seeing. So, at the end of the day, the common thread for why these retailers and staffing clients some of them are doing so well, is not just because that they are an essential organization, but it goes back to my point earlier about that they've had in place really strong business models that are tech enabled. I can't stress enough how important that element of technology is, and it's really allowed for success and increased demand with not just attracting candidates and individuals, but also driving consumer demand of their product. So I think I talked a bit about it earlier, about retailers that have strong multi-channel and omni-channel strategies. Having those been established well before the pandemic has also been a measure of those are the types of retailers that have done really well, because they had technology-enabled solutions in place that just served themselves very well for this digital environment that we've been dealing with. So, I can, just covering off on a few, giving the folks the ability, just to think about. I mean, I've done it myself, where when we were in the middle, complete national shutdown in April, and I was fortunate enough to have a quick serve restaurant franchise loaded on my app on my phone, and I was able to quickly order and have food delivered to me completely touchless. And having that ability and that security and that enablement as a consumer made me a repeat consumer when we were in full shutdown. So that type of what I'll call technologically enabled workflow and buying enablement was a huge driver, and those are the types of organizations that are really seeing that what I'll call success, not just in business, but in their recruitment and hiring strategies as well.
Yeah, very important. And that was such a great personal example too, because, we are touching on a lot of things that our businesses are doing at a high level, but really when we get down into it and share the details of our personal lives, because we're all dealing with this right now and we're all taking advantage of certain things. So I thought that was a great great personal example to round that out. So let's go ahead and, talk about Sterling's clients. Let's talk about some recruiting trends that we're seeing. So I'm going to circle back to the question that we did get earlier on LinkedIn. So what are some of the best practices amid COVID-19 you've seen being implemented among retail clients? But feel free to open this up to staffing and franchise as well.
Yeah, sure. So, what I'll say is that, best practices starts with, like I said, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but a strong establishment of technology-based processes and workflows are really critical. So, we actually have seen a good portion of our retail clients who've needed that, let's call it optimization in some of their process. They are looking at different technologies and new technologies that they're incorporating into their workflows, because they had some learnings on, I didn't have a certain element of recruiting in my process that allowed us to have enough individuals in our pool to meet our fills. So that, good learning, best practice, have a technology-enabled solution, not just for your recruitment team, but even more importantly for your candidates and the individuals that you're trying to attract. Really critical, especially now, because again, depending on the subsector of the industry or even the industry that you're looking for a job in, it depends. It could be an employer's market or it could be an employees market. So, from my point of view, that's really critical. The other thing too, and this just goes back to the increased demand of jobs in certain sectors, and there's obviously a huge influx of individuals who are out of work, who are looking for work. The element of being really transparent about what your, retailers need to continue to focus on their brand and their culture, and why is it that someone should be working with and for them. I think that's a really critical element that retailers have done, candidly, a phenomenal job of doing in attracting talent. And I think doing so is really critical, because ultimately that individual is a reflection of you and your brand, and your ability to be really clear and concise about that is important. And then obviously with, I would say the third piece is, and this is more just more relevant to, retailers, staffing organizations who are meeting client requirements, and this goes for other industries too. The question has come up to us during COVID on how they should flex their decisioning perhaps on individuals, and looking at the pools of candidates. So should we change our decisioning criteria on how we look at the type of individual to hire versus not hire? I would say contingent on the organization and the industry and the types of hires you are. That's a best practice that we recommend that you always do. At minimum, every quarter, 90 to 120 days, perhaps every 6 months, you should be assessing what your hiring criteria looks like, how it impacts the pool of candidates that you're bringing in, and your ability to hire effectively and efficiently to be able to keep your operations functioning well. And everyone's definition of risk is different. So that's the beauty of each organization being its own. It's been something we've been working very closely with many of our clients on. We do so, like I said, ongoing. It's just a best practice in the verticalization of, our business lines and the way that we have them. But that's something that we, as a best practice, we always recommend that you do. But at this time, especially in those industries that have high demand, being able to assess what makes best sense. If your demand is increased, what does that mean on the criteria that you're ultimately decisioning on? But alternatively too, you have to balance it with, what your definition and what your, we'll call it risk tolerances for, what you're willing to bring into the organization. Again, going straight back to brand and culture, et cetera. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, I think it definitely did. That was great. So you spoke a little bit about hiring practices and clients asking questions in regards to that. Are you seeing anything else interesting in relation to hiring patterns among our clients, or are they asking, any other interesting questions that might be beneficial to our audience listening right now?
Yeah, great question. So, like we've been talking about, as not just as a nation, but as a world, we're facing so much uncertainty in many industries. And, like we've been talking about, that the navigation of all of that as a recruiter and as an organization trying to hire is no different. There's a lot of uncertainty that they're looking to manage both short and long term. And it's no small feat. So, like we talked about, some industries are struggling to keep those doors open. Others are really trying to keep up with just boosting up that hiring to meet that demand of those, the essential organizations that we talked about. So for those organizations looking to hire and hire fast, again, that reliable technology is key. That continues to preserve and optimize that candidate experience to bring really strong talent in. But due to current circumstances and social distancing measures, virtual hiring, like we talked about, is that top trend in recruitment, and it's become and remained the preferred approach with a lot of organizations, is what we've found.
Yeah.
And seen. Alternatively, we've actually seen some, outside of using technology-driven solutions for virtual hiring, we've also seen some organizations and some staffing firms get really creative, where I think it was in the early part of the summer, we saw them have these drive up and drive through hiring events where you meet at the warehouse parking lot, and the recruiters would meet you, but you wouldn't have to leave the comfort of your car. You could interview from the seat of your car.
That's great. I love that. Yeah, I hadn't heard of that. That's amazing. I love that.
Yeah. So really, from my point of view, really creative. And again, it's that level of trust and safety and security that candidates and, future, potential employees are looking for when they're looking to get a job. So, so like retailers needing to have a strong channel for meeting consumer buying behavior, organizations and staffing firms really need to make sure that they're establishing that, what I'll call that multi-channeled recruitment strategy that gives them that strong output that they need to meet their hiring needs. So it's that level of virtual recruiting, traditional recruiting that they've potentially done or can potentially put it back into place again. And like I said, some of these really unique ideas that we've seen pop up as well. As far as background screening itself, and return to work initiatives, again, that theme that I continue to hone in on of trust and safety and the quality of new candidates. We have seen new products and new solutions that have presented themselves. COVID-19 testing is obviously at the forefront right now with many organizations, and offering that ability and the options of both in-person and self-administered COVID testing before you formally get your job. And then obviously there's that active testing that happens as well if you are an employee that's going into, has truly gone back to work, whether it's in a corporate environment or in a non-corporate, more retail, hourly type worker environment. So even contact tracing as well has also been something that organizations are now doing. It's just a new part of the hiring process they've needed to account for, invest in, and really understand how incorporating that impacts that aggregate end-to-end workflow from recruit to hire. So, alternatively, I think I had touched upon it earlier as well, with the increase of organizations recruiting remotely, hiring on site, recruiting remotely, hiring remotely, like call center hiring, for example, verifying that candidate prior to them starting has become much more, what I'll call prevalent and important, because you're not physically sitting with that person. You're relying and you're trusting on the virtual environment of recruiting that you're now working in. And I will say that we have seen an increased demand for identity solutions. That it's basically a biometric solution that takes your government issued ID and confirms through facial recognition and also data recognition based on what a candidate provides on the front end to help mitigate that candidate fraud. So that has also been something that, again, is a new trend that we're seeing because of this, because of this new dynamic that COVID-19 has presented.
Great. So speaking of our clients and also speaking of technology as well, we are hosting a webinar with one of our clients, Racetrack, on October 14th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. It's titled Leveraging Technology for Competitive Advantage in the Evolving Hiring Landscape. So Vincenza, can you tell our audience just a little bit about what this webinar is going to entail if they choose to register and attend?
Yes, I'm so glad that you brought it up because we're very excited about this webinar that we're doing with Racetrack. It touches upon many of the themes that we talked about today, just at a much more granular level. Racetrack's going to talk to all of you about how they incorporated technology both into their recruitment process and on the back end for their recruitment teams, and how they looked at their trends to allow for them making those decisions that they needed to in evolving what we'll call their hiring, recruitment, background, and employee plans. So we're really excited about it. They've been one of those what we'll call essential organizations over the past several months, but candidly, they are essential every day. They are convenience stores and gas stations. We could not live without them. So wonderful insights that we plan to have them share, and grateful for the opportunity to talk through with the rest of the audience out there on things that they can think about and consider as they look at their aggregate talent acquisition and HR programs.
Yeah, it's going to be a great webinar for sure. So again, it is on October 14th at 1 p.m. Eastern. We're going to go ahead and put the registration link in the comment section across Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. So please join us on the 14th. We look forward to that for sure. So I'm going to take a moment now, as we wrap up this amazing conversation. If anyone watching has any questions, final thoughts for Vincenza, please go ahead and submit your questions now. And as we wait, Vincenza, final thoughts from you. And also, can you please let our audience know how to best stay in touch with you, engage with you on social media, things like that?
Yes. So final thoughts. I am hopeful that this session was brought some value to some folks and gave them some good insights into what we've been seeing and hearing and watching some of our clients experience, and helping them along the way to enable their strategies from a hiring standpoint. That includes everything from meeting hiring demand, keeping their workplaces safe, hiring strong talent. So grateful for this time and opportunity. And I also wanted to pause and say, I think I mentioned it at the top of the hour when we started. The retail and staffing space is a big part of Sterling's organization. We're incredibly grateful to all of them and to trust us in being their partner. So it's a wonderful privilege to service what I'll call two of the industries and sectors that have been so critical to all of us during this time. So many thanks to them for enabling me to have this job that I have. So but to your second point around how to connect with me, the easiest way to connect with me is via LinkedIn or via email for anyone listening. I think Caitlin mentioned it, and there was that question that came up about best practices. This is at the core of what our vertical structure here at Sterling is about, consulting on best practices that we see and really enabling organizations to be agile and quickly evolve their programs as they need to meet hiring demands. It's what we love to do. So please do not hesitate to reach out to myself, and I commit that we will get you in the hands of the right folks on my team to help consult, guide, and have a meaningful conversation.
That's great. Thank you. So there are no further questions at this time. If our audience listening, you do have any questions that come up after the live stream, feel free to reach out to Vincenza on LinkedIn, to reach out to Sterling on our social media platforms. We'll make sure, like Vincenza said, we'll get those questions answered and we will put you in the right hands for sure. So wrapping up, thank you so much, Vincenza, for joining me today. We had an amazing conversation. It was definitely helpful for me and our audience. So it was truly great. And then of course, thanks to our audience too, for taking the time out today.
Yes, thanks to everyone for joining. And hopefully we will see everyone soon in a couple of weeks at our webinar.
Yes, absolutely. And just a final reminder that we do go live every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern across Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. So we will catch you guys next Tuesday, and we will also catch you on October 14th at our webinar. So thank you again, and hope to see you guys next time.
Thanks, Caitlin.